There we go. All right, we're on. Good evening, everyone. This is Thursday, December 15th, 2016, and this is the Board of Selectmen's meeting. First up on our agenda is a public hearing on the petition of the Neshoba Valley Winery to amend the existing agricultural business use special permit to allow the construction of a new barn in addition to the restaurant. The new barn will accommodate farming equipment, and the addition is less than 300 square feet and will provide a better service area. The property is located at 92-100 Wattaquatic Hill Road in lovely Bolton, Massachusetts. Rich Pelletier, come on down.
How you doing?
Good. Yourself?
Good. Copy of the smaller version?
Yes.
I was the engineer. So, all of this is the existing restaurant out here. There's two unusable spaces in here next to a stairway that already exists. And we're just proposing to build this wall and this wall to take and move this weight station out here and then have an area here where we can now use to mix brandies and hard liquor drinks, because now we've gotten the license to be able to service that, so we need the space. There's no, we don't plan on increasing reservations at all. We don't plan on increasing seating at all. It's purely a use that's going to make it more convenient for our wait staff to provide services.
Okay. Looks good.
And so they're roughly around 10 by 10. So when I said that there were less than 300, I'm significantly less than the second one. For a new barn, existing barn, dirt floors, and we've taken over land across the street from the Bolton Conservation Trust. We're planning on taking over Coolidge Farm and farming that property also. Oh, cool. And we're investing a lot more money into a lot more expensive equipment, which currently is stored outside right now. It's not good for the long-term use of the equipment, and we're in the winter we'll be doing maintenance and repair of it. We don't really have any space to do maintenance and repair because the barn is not suitable for it. So this is a new barn that's going to be built. So if you're familiar with the property, when you drive into the winery driveway, the restaurant's on the left. Our existing barn is here, and this one will actually go to the right-hand side. It will actually create a better buffer, I think, between us and the neighbor's property, because we do park cars right in here. So this will actually cause a visual barricade between a parking lot area.
Okay. Looks nice. Looks nice. I'm good with that. I don't have any questions.
So this is the location for the barn?
Yep. And this is where we currently park cars. And when Mike Romano owned this house, he was concerned that we'd build something back in here to block his view. But this is actually, there's a new garage that he built here, so this is actually almost parallel with the garage, so it's not blocking any view, any impact on that.
I'm fine with it.
I read everything and I submitted them.
Great. Any questions from the audience? Okay, if there are none, I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to amend the existing agricultural business use special permit to allow the construction of a new barn and in addition to the restaurant.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Do we have all the members of the advisory committee?
Yeah, I just asked Pam, I'll put on up there.
Okay, great. Get them down.
You're voting on transfers for
Doesn't make sense to do any of that stuff. might as well, sure.
All right, just two quick items under my report tonight. First of all, update on the FY18 budgets. Almost all of them have been submitted, and just a couple to get in, and we know where they are, and we're pursuing them, and I'm not concerned about that. Also, everyone's been working on their mission statements, which we'll be talking about, I'm sure, later on, so people have been very good about that. I think it's been very helpful to be working on those mission statements. And the update on the Shelter Valley Regional Dispatch is just as an FYI, in early January, Berlin will be coming on board. They've been working on that transition for quite some time. And in late January, Townsend will be coming on board. That's not something we had envisioned quite that quickly, but they've run into major staffing problems out there and are no longer able to keep a full complement of employees on for dispatch function. So we had a discussion with the 911 grant folks, and by taking Townsend on earlier than what we had planned, the state is, the expression that the managers used was, we wanted the state to hold the communities, the existing communities harmless for any additional expense that may be incurred, and the state has agreed to do that.
That's great.
So there'll be no impact on our assessments.
Excellent, that's great. That's great.
And up to this point, things have been running very well.
What, no Minuteman update?
No, I thought I would take a holiday break on that one.
All right.
I do have a video I could show.
Yeah, we'll hold off on that. All right, well, let's wait for the advisory committee to come on down. There isn't anything now.
So Don, with the dispatch, with every town that comes, that joins, does the cost go down?
That's the way it's working out right now. In fact, I can't give you the exact dollar amount, but this year's assessment, I think, is $170,000 or $172,000. I forget exactly what the amount is. And for FY18, I believe it's $157,000.
That's good. That's good. So that's working out well.
Can we do the liquor licenses?
You could, if you vote them as a block, you could.
Sure, let's do that. Sure. All right, so we'll take some things out of order, Bolton, Selectman business. Liquor licenses to be renewed contingent on receiving the appropriate paperwork. And the liquor licenses are Bolton Country Cupboard, Inc., Dagnall Liquor Inc., The International, 15dec Restaurant and Bar, Neshoba Valley Spirits Limited, Great Brook Farms, and Twin Spring Holdings. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And you could do the common vic from the class 2 as well.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, so we have a list of licenses for approval, contingent on receipt of appropriate paperwork. Class 2 license, Beetlebug 3, Common Victular, Bolton Bean, John Stevenson, DBA Bolton Spring Farms, Classic Pizza 3, Davis Farms, Colonial Candies, Country Cupboard, 15dec Restaurant and Bar, Neshoba Valley Winery, and Great Brook Farms operating at, Slater's operating at Great Brook Farms.
Yeah, the next page is well.
Yep. We have the International and Twin Springs, and one organization that's not renewing the license is Bambi Philbin, doing business as Odd and Old Antiques. So we'll be doing those. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's done. And
We do the appointment of Jeffrey Bean.
let's do the appointment of Jeffrey Bryant to the Conservation Commission. I'm assuming that the position was duly advertised. Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Jeffrey's here.
Hi,
How are you?
nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for participating. We appreciate it.
So I'll make a motion that we appoint Jeffrey Bryant to the Conservation Commission.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Thank you.
have the Bolton Access TV people here. So I think we're pretty much...
Do you have minutes to vote?
No, we
Actually, Ken's upstairs, so Ken's probably gonna do the Bolton access.
So he's part of advisory as well.
Yeah,
They do know that we're waiting for them.
yeah. They do.
You want me to go?
Good evening.
Hello. How are you guys?
Doing well?
Cookies down here too, huh?
Yeah.
Very festive here in the town hall this evening.
Very festive.
Yeah, the golden shoes that fell out of the street there, probably will come back.
Is there another report already?
I haven't seen him. No, someone,
Yeah, Marcus.
Okay, next up on our agenda is a discussion of the upcoming FY18 budget season and an update on adopting best practices. Brad?
Yeah, so thank you for the time this evening. So if you guys remember, end of September, we all got together, we watched, we sat through a presentation on municipal finance, best practices. Tom, I know you weren't there. By chance, were you able to catch that? All right, so I believe it's September 27th, it's on video. Lovely watching. Make sure it's late at night so you can fall asleep. It's riveting. The point is, you know, the town is doing an awful lot. Well, the goal is really to bring more information out to light, available in a more easily read fashion, so that all of us that live and breathe this stuff day in and day out, you know, we understand it, we get it, and then we get to town meeting and there's a lot of, well, I wasn't aware of this, or I think this should be tabled so we can have more discussion, or, you know, whatever it is. So the game plan is to take really a lot of the existing information that we already have, but just essentially repackage it in a format that's going to be more readily available. So, you know, case in point, org charts, listing of full-time employees, right? So and the whole idea here is the goal is over the course of the next 2 to 3 years to try and get us to a point where we are able to potentially put forth our budget in a capacity that it can be reviewed by certain reviewers, almost a test, if you will. Maybe we get a little accolade that says, wow, you guys did a really good job on your budget, and it's very open and transparent and all that stuff. So that's the end game 2-3 years from now. This particular year, you know, we as a committee, and the game plan is, we're kind of taking on the lead with Don, with Donna, with Ninotchka, pulling this data together. Some of the key criteria that we're choosing to focus on right out of the gates is org chart, FTE, summaries, policies, some procedures, mission statements, things like, start to get that in play and get that tied to each. So that's a little bit of an update. We're pulling all that data together. When we get there, the game plan specifically, particularly on policies, we're gonna be coming back to you guys, have an opportunity for you guys to look at it, see what you think, and then really just kind of take it across the town. So that's it. Questions? All right. Then, as it relates to the budget, so we are, I was hoping to have a little bit more info, but it's still early on. I mean, there's, with Dawn's budget letter going out, department heads are getting their budgets in. So that is in the process of being finalized. The expectation is, we'll start the January, kicking off like we normally do. We're still working on putting together a schedule, but that's coming together tonight. Early from what I know, and just knowing that Dawn's letter, the department heads, I feel as though do a very good job on putting forth their budget, following the edict that Dawn, puts forth. We're asking for a level funded budget, and knowing that I am sure there'll be one or two departments that not necessarily ignore that request, but come in with a budget that is higher than it was last year, and they come before us and we'll talk it through and see what's going on. So from that front, I expect that to happen. Hard to know exactly capital planning. I mean, we had a pretty healthy year last year. We did an awful lot. There was several items that we did borrow for that, quite frankly, more than I wanted to, but they were really critical items that the town needed. So I'm rather eager to see what we're gonna have from a capital planning standpoint, but I already know there's, whispers and in some cases really loud screams on desire on potentially land, and those are some healthy numbers. Then let alone whatever else gets put onto us from a capital planning standpoint. But there was a couple of things. We were looking at, Nanoshka was great in terms of getting me some data from it just completely escapes me. It'll come to me. So, no, it's trending downward. The stabilization, yes, holy cow. Stabilization fund, there's some general rules of thumb, and that's part of this GOFOA that we are looking to, take some best practices. That stabilization fund that we have, as a percentage of the budget, is starting to trend down. So we're going to want to take a look at that and see what makes sense for the town of Bolton. That in concert with free cash. Where we landed last year was a $300,000 target of free cash, which is essentially the number that we're looking to hold over, to end with, so that it then moves forward to start the following year. So that's where we were last year. We'll be talking about that moving forward. So that's really, the update. There's a couple of concerns. I'll be honest with you, looking through the ledger sheets right now, where we are. I mean, it's the middle of December, and advisory, I'm sure you guys are aware, advisory starts the year with a $100,000 advisory reserve transfer. Presently, we are at $80,000. So we've already had a rather active year. We've had to go pretty deep into that already. A little concerning, namely because there's been years in the past where when the budget cycle is over and what was left in that was, gathered up and used to clear up any other accounts or move forward to the following year of free cash. And we've ended the year in cases of $30,000, $40,000. We're already at 80. By the end of tonight, we're going to 60. Mainly because there's a $20,000 request transfer request from legal. I mean, there's a legal line in the budget for $40,000, and we are already down to zero on that. So I must commend you. You guys have been exceptionally active. At the same time, I'd ask you to knock it off and slow it down, because it's pretty healthy. And then also just, we had a pretty healthy night, Monday night. I mean, we started this year with a very large free cash number relative to last year. But, we approved some healthy ticket items Monday evening. So I fully anticipate as we move closer and go into this season, we're all gonna have a better idea. And as you well know, we meet right here Tuesday evenings. So looking forward to seeing you. And that's really the update that I have. Any questions from you guys?
So your budget process will start in earnest at the beginning of
Yeah, I mean, we kick off, first part of January. As a committee, we generally, bring in, for the most part, pretty much every committee department across, but, we're meeting tonight, and we're gonna take a look at some of the committees, some that it is, 100% wage, line that we don't really have any ability to adjust. So, really just trying to be respectful of people's time, and if we don't necessarily have to see them, we're not gonna ask them to come in. We're still figuring that out, because there's others on the committee that are also of the philosophy, we'd like to just check in, see how they are, just give us an update on what's gonna happen, what is happening within your budget or committee. And then obviously, and generally, through the course of a conversation, just some, organic communication generally develops, and we have a pretty healthy discussion. So I don't necessarily want to, I'm cautious to, just look at someone's budget and say, there's not an increase, so we don't need to see you. That is absolutely not the case. So we're still working on that. But the idea is, there's a lot of committees, and we've got a pretty good idea of what's going on, and can we be a little more efficient so we can get finished earlier, so it's not as frantic down the home stretch as we get closer and closer to annual town meeting.
Right. Are you also, based on your earlier discussion, potentially anticipating looking at trying to apply some funds and increase the stabilization fund a bit?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely we will be looking at that without a doubt. Namely, because the concern is that it has trended down relative to percentage. I mean, the numbers remain flat. Yeah, it's earning interest and it's growing, but it's not growing as fast as the collective budget, and therefore it's subsequently trending downward.
Right.
So
it's been years since we've put any money.
Yeah. So that, an evaluation, I mean, the big ticket items, that, the looking at OPEB, I think we've done a good job putting it right into the budget, but I'm sure there'll be a conversation over that. Looking at stabilization in concert with free cash, what is that number, where do we want to be? All of those policies from a best practice standpoint, and assuming consensus across the board, really.
And a new fund that I've already recommended to Brad that we seriously considered creating, and we discussed this at the finance team meeting, was a fund for maintenance for the water treatment facility.
Right.
That we have no funds at our disposal right now.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why we had to appropriate $88,000 in town meeting. And if we were a private entity, we would be required by DEP when the facility was built to put 15% of the project aside as a fund, and we run the risk of not being, if we can't react quickly to something that may happen at the water treatment facility, we run the risk of, depending on what it is, not being able to occupy the the buildings that it services.
Right, right.
So we certainly don't want that to happen, and we need to be proactive, and I had a discussion with DEP about it, and they don't require us to do anything, wouldn't even make recommendations because it's not what they do, but I did bounce some ideas off of them that they seem to look upon favorably, so I do think that's something that we'll need to discuss.
No, I think it's a good idea, just considering the fact that we're not quite halfway through the quote-unquote lifespan of that facility.
Yeah.
It makes sense to start budgeting now for what we need to do.
So can a consultant that monitors that facility, can they come up with a projected list of components that are going to be wearing out in the next?
We already started working on it. For instance, there are 8 membranes in that facility that cost $6,000 a piece to replace. So we know if we have to start replacing membranes, there's a $48,000 price tag right there, and that doesn't include labor, that's just the material. So, and that would be a big deal. Now, they don't go overnight. As we monitor it, we can see whether or not they're starting to go, but that is something that we need to consider.
Yeah, and then just, the continual annual saga of what we look at, and Dawn mentioning the finance team, it jarred my memory, is looking at, we are so heavily focused on the cost side of the equation, right? But it is a balancing act on the revenue. Good or bad, however you want to look at it, revenue is pretty easy to look at because it's predominantly from one source. But, Dawn and I have been talking with Stan, we've been talking, others, we are looking at trying to figure out, are there any other ways that we can look from a revenue standpoint to boost that line? Because that is clearly flat.
Right.
Relative to cost.
Right, so we've had some potential opportunities in the past to offset some costs, and unfortunately those opportunities have come and gone. I think we should go back and look at, while it's not a big number, the slight increase in the restaurant and alcohol tax, of which probably more than 60% of all the towns and cities in Massachusetts are already doing that. So it's not
Exactly.
So things like that.
Yeah, there was significant, a fairly healthy amount of process made to determine would it make sense for solar on the transfer station, and ultimately, the parties couldn't come together. But so there's a renewed focus on that, and if not there, what other buildings does the town own that potentially might make sense? And even if, can we be, cost neutral on that? A given electricity bill from a building or collected from the town, can we at least offset some of that by way of other avenues to assist? So
I agree. I would like to take another run at trying to site a solar array at the landfill and evaluate where it makes sense to see if solar panels on some of the town buildings will make sense as well. And one other thing that we discussed was, I think it would be worth our while to investigate, not that we'd have to do anything, but I think we should at least investigate and gather information on if it makes sense to sell the rights to the cell tower, or at least some sort of lease to some entity, and then we would still own it. There are options there. So the cell tower is an asset. I have to assume as technology evolves, those types of cell towers will become less and less in demand. So perhaps it would be a good idea to try to see at least what the value of it is.
yeah, so there's a couple things. So however you want to take a look at it. I mean, is it us looking at low hanging fruit, trying to solve a problem? I mean, again, the other option, I don't think it's probably going to be too palatable to taxpayers in town. I mean, we could suggest all taxpayers generate a relationship with a construction builder and add 100,000, 200,000 of betterments onto their house. But I don't, that probably wouldn't go over it.
No, I don't think so.
But it would be a sure way to increase revenue. So, absence of that, which I am not in favor, I'm just explaining the concept. So,
Alright.
other than that, I think I'm good here.
Okay, no, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you. All right. Next up on our agenda is a discussion on the use of force policies at the Neshoba Regional High School.
Yeah, so I asked to put this on the agenda. I think, following up on last night's heated discussion, I'd just like to say what Neil, Lorraine, and I have in common is, we all have children at the high school, I think starting as freshmen this year. I'd also like to say, about my background, I worked for 5 years at the Devereaux Foundation teaching teenagers with emotional disorders in a vocation program for horticulture. So I know what it's like when students are non-compliant, not in the right area, and I know what it's like to be cursed out by students. So there was a use of force incident this year at the high school that started with a student in the hallway without a pass and ended somehow with the student pepper sprayed, taken into custody and charged. And so as a parent, that concerns me. And I think it's important as parents, thinking about our own children and also their friends, that there are times when our children are having emotional problems, just that they're weak with their peers at school. And so I think it's important for all of us to think, one of our children or one of their good friends could be in a situation like this where they've kind of painted themselves into a corner at school. And what I really hope is that someone would help them out of that situation, lend them a hand, get them out of that corner rather than kind of escalating the problem. So, that's how I'm looking at this issue. Now, as a selectman and a taxpayer, there is also a liability issue, and because the town of Bolton has hired these school resource officer. If we're very lucky in the current situation, there's nobody's filing suit, but I could imagine if this happened to a friend of my children, they'd be very upset, and it could lead to a lawsuit, and Bolton would be shouldering all of the costs. You just heard Brad Cody scolding us about our lawyer bills, which are way over budget. And so I think it's important to kind of discuss, how, use of force could lead to possible lawsuits that we would be responsible for, and how, it could be more equitable in sharing that responsibility.
So what are you trying to solve? You've made a nice statement, but what are you trying to solve?
Well, I think it's very important that we work with our town council and the other two towns. If we're going to continue with this program, that we work with them to come up with an equitable division of responsibility if there are lawsuits. We have a new superintendent, and so I think it would be great for the superintendent and the chief of police to, write a memorandum about the role of the school resource officer, what the responsibilities are. I think it's important to, just as a basic thing, that, the resource officer is not there to discipline the students. That's the responsibility of the administration. The resource officer ideally is there to provide safety to the students, and that's usually related to, fighting, weapons, drugs, and they're also there to develop relationships with the student community. So I think it would be great if, the superintendent and Chief Nelson could get together and kind of work on that, and kind of a memorandum of understanding that, something that I think parents and, everyone could get behind.
Lorraine, last night you indicated that you would be prepared this evening to talk about the so-called liability issue. Are you prepared to discuss that at this point in time?
I have brought with us Carrie Janas, who's the school district's counsel. So if you'd like us to come to the table, we're
Sure.
happy to.
Sure.
Thank you.
And I think also,
Did you get her last name?
while
Jenness.
while there's one individual who is raising some concern, I think it really still hasn't been really articulated as to what the problem is trying to be solved. Just because someone has an opinion doesn't necessarily mean there's a problem. But I think we should pick that up at the next juncture. But I think the discussion of the liability should
So Carrie and I have talked about the situation. We've talked about not just last night's discussion and the fact that this is on the Selectmen's agenda, which is entirely the Selectmen's purview, but we've also talked about the previous month's events. So she's been appropriately prepared, and I'm just going to turn it over to her to respond.
So I think on some level you're right. I mean, there isn't a clear distribution of who's responsible. Obviously the SRO reports to the chief of police of Bolton, but when he's in the school building, or she, where does the liability for that fall? Most cities and towns that I've worked with do have a formal MOU between the police department and the school department that outlines what policies the SRO will follow, who the SRO reports to, which, how liability is distributed between the entities. And I think that for everyone's sake, it would be good to just have that formalized. So I think on that level, we're in agreement. I think that,
However,
having some clarity on that point is a good thing. And
except that I think that the topic on the agenda.
the discussion of policies is not appropriate for a Board of Selectmen agenda. That should be on the school committee agenda. To the extent that there are questions or issues about school committee policies, the school committee is the one who decides those. And as a town official or as a parent, I'm sure that you're welcome to request to be put on the agenda for a school committee meeting to have that discussion. To the extent that it's the town of Bolton being concerned about its own liability, that is your purview. And like I said, I think that we're in agreement that it would be in everyone's best interest to have a formal written document that says who's responsible for what.
And that written document would also, in other words, if litigation arose out of something that occurred with the SRO, that the school district would indemnify the town?
Well, I'm not sure that the agreement would end up saying that, but the agreement would address who is responsible if there was a lawsuit based on the SRO's actions.
But why would the town absorb a loss that arose on school grounds?
Because my understanding is that the officer reports to the chief of police of Bolton. The school doesn't dictate to the officer what the officer does, the police chief does. Therefore, it goes back to the town.
Right, and that was the point I was trying to make last night, is that, to me, it makes more sense for the school district as a separate legal entity to take care of I assume the SRO has some security component, that it's there for
I mean,
SG.
in the other cities and towns I've worked with, they have different roles. I mean, a lot of them have an educational component. They're there to talk to the kids about opiate abuse and so that the kids are familiar with a police officer, not when they're in a situation of crisis, but, you know, SROs have a lot of roles.
So it seems to me to make more sense for the school district to employ its SRO rather than arising out of, you know, I just think.
I mean, that could be a decision that you make for the town of Bolton, that the town
Right.
of Bolton is not interested in having that relationship and potentially having that liability depending on what the final agreement ends up saying.
Because I believe we self-insure, right? Do we self-insure up to a certain level, or we self-insure 100%?
We don't sell that for liability, I mean, for,
In this, say someone sued as a result of an action taken by the SRO, and they sued the town of Bolton, is there an insurance policy that covers? There is.
our employees are
Then we're
indemnified.
not self-insured.
We're indemnified up to a certain level, yes.
Okay, so where, it just seems to me, if it's going to go forward where the town of Bolton, its police officers, they're acting as the SRO, we need some agreement
Yes.
to indemnify the town or work out that risk.
Right, I
So
mean,
it's,
exactly.
so
To
it's-
decide who has, I mean, I
Who
can't
has
make
it.
the agreement right now and tell you the
No,
district
I
is
know.
willing to take on the risk, but that should be decided.
as a
between the
selectman, I would
parties.
want the school
Of
district.
course you would.
Right.
And as the school's attorney, I would not want them.
You would rather not.
Yeah.
So, but that was the point I was trying to get across
Right.
last night, and there needs to be an agreement about
Yes.
how that occurs.
I absolutely agree with that.
So, and I think just practically, operationally, and logically, it just would make a lot more sense for the school district to be responsible for hiring its own SRO, supervising them, you know, that it would report to the superintendent, and she's shaking her head right now,
Well, I
but,
mean, that's a different
Yeah,
model,
yeah.
you know?
yeah.
That-
I mean, let's say,
We'll talk about that, like,
Right, I
what
mean,
we want, what we want to do, we'll
The
decide.
school committee can decide what happens, again, the town of Bolton can decide, we don't want our police
Right.
officers in the
well,
schools.
that's where I'm going with this.
And if that's your decision, that's your
Yes.
decision, then the school can make its own determination whether it works with one of the other
And
towns
they
or
could go
whether
to
it,
one of the other towns.
right, or they could hire their own employee,
Okay.
so. I think we
Yes,
understand each other,
yes,
okay.
I agree.
Can I join? Or not?
Yeah, Neil, you're part of the school committee and you're involved. You're more than welcome to come up, absolutely. You gotta bring your own chair.
BYOC.
Neil, just take my chair,
No, that's fine. So, part of what we're talking about here is not kind of jiving a little bit, because I'm hearing two things, and I think we need to get that clarification, because I'm hearing, I'm going to quote from last night, that the SRO is hired muscle for the administration. That's not really talking about liability, that's a preconceived notion, and you're talking about something different. So there's this weird dichotomy that's going on here with this conversation, and I think we kind of need to, on the school committee level, understand where you're coming from. Do you really want to get rid of the SRO, or are you worried about the liability? You know what I mean?
I'm worried about I think the liability is a legitimate concern.
So that aside,
we've
you're okay.
addressed.
That- I
Right.
think
But
That
that's-
all aside, you're
We're
okay
all
with the
on the same
SRO
page.
then? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I think the gentleman had different perspectives. I think you're attributing, Tom's perspective was the liability.
Well, there was, but then Tom mentioned yesterday about, you mentioned yesterday about crime being down 70%. It was much worse in the 1980s.
I mean,
This stuff, which kind of leads to that conversation. So I walked away yesterday not having an idea where the perspective was, whether it was truly liability, because I could bring up that fact about, I brought up the fact about what we're calling the culvert, which is a bridge that hasn't been taken care of, that we voted for, allocated money for. We got over 200 almost 200 students that are traveling over that daily, twice a day, and yet it's not taken care of. So if we're truly worried about liability and how that's going to affect the town, we self-assure. A head-on collision, a collapsing bridge, something like that. We've got kids that are involved, which is my concern, and I've talked to you guys a couple months ago about this, pleaded with you guys during the tri-town meeting, and I heard nothing back. And that goes to the other thing. This conversation that we're having here could have been held at the school. you guys were invited multiple times via emails to come on over, have a conversation with us by multiple people, and we received no replies on any of that. So if those things are important, I'm on the policy committee, I know no one contacted me for this, so I'm happy to sit there at the table with you guys and have this conversation, but, you know, you're dragging us here to talk about our policy, which really is confusing.
And I disagree with how you're characterizing things.
I don't know how I'm characterizing
No,
this.
you know, that's not even worth it. I think the issue on the agenda is the policy. And we've addressed a separate issue, which was the liability. And the reason we came here is because there was a discussion on your agenda about the school district's policies. And I think it's been made clear that the school district's policies belong to us. We are more than willing for you folks to come and talk with us. We've invited you. I've reached out to you myself. Please come, not to you, but certainly to Jonathan. And we are more than willing to have you come and sit with us and talk about it, rather than do what happened last night. Okay?
In agreement.
Great. Thank you. Are we good?
All right, so right now, the issue on the table is really crafting an MOU.
And, you know, if you'd like to have your town council do a first draft of it and then send it over and we can take a look, we're happy to do it that way.
I'll reach out to Bob and request that.
Okay. That's fine.
And then if there needs to be a follow-up discussion on policy, I would just request respectfully that you let me know, and I will be happy to get you in front of the group. It makes sense for it to go to policy subcommittee first, because they're the people that do the heavy lifting before it comes to the school committee. And I would ask that you do it that way versus in an open meeting or in a way that is not collaborative.
Speaking as a Bolton rep, the whole purpose of us doing Tri-Town and so forth is to actually have a channel of communication so that we all work well together. And I think that we need to work that the way that it's supposed to be. And I welcome the opportunity personally as one of your town representatives to do that at any point in time. So it should not be us on opposite sides of the table. We all have one common cause that we're working for, and I think that we need to pursue that.
All set?
Yeah, just real quick.
Could you just identify yourself?
Oh, sorry, Mark Russell, Board of Selectmen, Lancaster. Question for you, you may or not, may not be in a position to answer. What are the jurisdictional limitations of police officers whose students comprise a district, regional high school, when that high school is not located in the town? Because my question stems from a 2015 act of the legislature which seems to specifically govern SROs. And it seems limiting in that capacity. And you made a mention of if Bolton's unwilling to provide the SRO, perhaps one of the surrounding communities can. You know, as a representative of the Board of Lancaster, I'd like to know what those limitations are.
I would never.
I wasn't sure,
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have to look into if that's the direction that.
Can you do that? Can you look into it?
Yeah, but not tonight.
No, obviously. Not tonight. We all need a break. I would love for you to give me an opinion.
Dinner at some point. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely, again, if that's the road that we're going to go down, then.
Well, I think
we would
that's
look
one of
into-
the options the school committee needs to consider
Sure.
is talking to the other member towns, because if it turns out that this unfortunate situation turns into something where the Bolton Board of Selectmen decides that they do not want to allow one of their employees to perform that function, then I think we
Then we
would
can look at
like
what the other
to
options are,
engage.
and what the limits of.
I was reading that
Exactly.
legislation today, and there are clear limitations.
Yeah.
Mr. Burke.
Brian Burke, Stowe Board of Selectmen, and I appreciate your hearing me, and I'll be very brief. I think I have a better understanding tonight about the concerns of some of the Bolton Board of Selectmen. I think this might be a good subject, not with respect to any incidents, not with respect to policy, but the question of who should, if anyone but Bolton can, supply an SRO, questions of indemnification. I think those can be researched and successfully presented and discussed at our next Tri-Town meeting on January 11th. I understand your concern about the indemnification. On the other hand, I would like to know, because this is a Bolton police officer, and because I assume the insurance policy, and I'm just approaching this as an insurance attorney, because the insurance policy covers all the Bolton police officers, is it a significant increase in your premiums just to cover that person, excuse me, that SRO? I'm not saying one way or the other, those are the kinds of questions I think we could profitably discuss next month. And as far as an indemnification agreement, the thing, and I defer to counsel, the thing, again, as an insurance attorney, the school district would have to get their own policy to cover the acts of a Bolton police officer. And I'm not sure that that's possible, and if it is possible, whether it's economical. Now, we understand that Bolton is applying the SRO, we appreciate that. It's one of the things of having the high school in Bolton, I suppose, just like you're being able to hold your town meetings at the high school. Although the previous superintendent always said we could do that too, but I don't think it ever would work that well. But what we want to do is we want to be fair among the member towns of the school district, but I think we need a little more understanding of what we're really talking about in terms of dollars and indemnification, which certainly you can shift the risk, but does it make economic sense to shift the risk? Policy, I think that's for the school committee. I would think it's also the selectmen's policy with respect to Bolton police officers. I mean, you guys got to talk to the town administrator, who talks to the chief of police, who talks to the SRO. I think it's better if everybody sits down and gets an understanding of what the SRO's job is. But I wouldn't put that on for the tri-town, subject to hearing differently here tonight, or in between now. I think I would just want to talk about some of these legal issues that you have raised. Which are good ones, I understand indemnification, believe me, I understand the process and the concept. But I'm wondering if it makes true economic sense in this case. And we would only know that by next week. Well, I spoke longer than I said I would. That's because I'm an attorney. And Mr. Hawks, my colleague on the board, looks like he wants to correct me, so.
I would never venture that far. I would rather echo comments of my counterpart from Lancaster, that certainly Tri-Town is not a governmental structure, it's an informal one. The formal boards that need to be informed to participate in these discussions, perhaps through the avenue of Tri-Town, is through its individual boards, you folks, and our folks. So on my only request in saying, and I'm liaison to the Neshoba district from the Stowe Board of Selectmen. And I used to be Tri-Town rep, but now...
We can have Tri-Town. I'm sorry, Mr. Hawks, I apologize for interrupting.
Thank you, sir. I think that I would like to echo his request that as soon as possible, when you have, your attorney, Madam Chairman, has had a chance to research what is being referenced that I know nothing of, as a layperson, unlike my learned Esquire friend, that be made available as soon as possible to the through the town and communication system to the boards of all three towns. So that if that could happen before the next Tri-Town meeting, it certainly would educate us better, or whenever it happens.
No, I understand.
Whatever is a timely thing, that's my,
I think that what I would want to make certain of is that the district is assuming, God bless you, but that the district is assuming the cost for appropriate research that she would be doing on our behalf, and that the town would be assuming the cost for the research that would be appropriate for them to do. So Carrie and I will talk, and whatever comes back, I will be certain to share it with all three towns. And just as a
I didn't think otherwise, but I just wanted to...
yeah, I absolutely will, and I really want to say thank you to the 3 selectmen from Lancaster, the selectmen from Stowe. We really appreciate the support that you've given this school district, and we'll make sure that it continues, even with you guys. So thank you.
Stan, you have a question?
Yeah, Stan Starr, the Lancaster Board of Selectmen Chairman. I can't be quite as eloquent as my colleague Brian here was.
Be brief or everyone will love you.
But I will be brief. No, I have nothing to add to, other than the fact that very supportive. I got a couple of calls today from residents in Lancaster, concerns that there might be a loss of that resource officer. And it goes beyond policing activities, well beyond it. So that's something I wanted to share with everyone here this evening, that it's more than just a person with a badge. To many people, at least I say many people have expressed that very, very clearly to me. So I think the conversation here tonight was very civil. I missed the energy from last night, unfortunately. I wish I could capture that, but I had to settle for a video this morning. But be that as it may, I just wanted to put that out there for what it's worth.
No, thank you, Stan, and I agree with you. I think the SRO is a very, very important individual and tool that is definitely needed at the
You know,
site.
it might be helpful since everyone's talking. Our principal, are you okay? Harry just speaking is like, oh no.
To speak on the spot.
Just from your perspective of what the function of the SRO is in the high school, I'm not sure that everyone understands what the school resource officer does in the perspective of the Neshoba Regional School District.
The school resource officer has a wide range of functions. So there's lots of daily things that happen, interactions. I mean, you actually mentioned a lot of the things that an SRO should be doing, building relationships with kids, getting to know kids. There are situations that happen when you've got 1,000 kids in the same space for 180 days a year. One of the primary responsibilities of an SRO, though, is one that you hope that they never have to carry out. And that is, as the principal, I'm the person who's responsible for 1,000 kids and over 100 staff members' safety every day. And we have a wonderful track record at Neshoba. I'm happy to say that I and my administrative team are able to maintain a very safe environment at the high school. Unfortunately, there are situations in which, rare situations, in which safety is compromised or in which the learning environment is compromised, and having a school resource officer there to support us in those situations is incredibly important. Those are very few and far between, thankfully, but I'm very glad to have the support of the SRO, and I'm very glad to have the support of the Bolton Police and also the Lancaster and Stowe Police. But on a day-to-day basis, you know, those are the very isolated incidents that are incredibly important. But on a day-to-day basis, it's walking the halls, getting to know kids. We have incidents sometimes, you know, where theft occurs in the high school. We have instances in which kids aren't getting along. The school resource officer is there to help us resolve those situations. One of the things that the SRO does is helps us avoid police involvement, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but by having a police officer who's there working as a co-staff member with us on campus, it means that we can avoid things getting to the legal sense. That doesn't mean that doesn't happen sometimes as well. But getting to classrooms, speaking to students, talking about things like cyberbullying. We had a presentation last week talking about teen substance abuse, and that's something that the SRO gets into classrooms and does work with us as well. So it's an incredibly important and valuable job. It really is about the individual interactions that happen on a day-to-day basis, but also is about being there in those few rare instances where critical incidents happen that we as an administrative team can't fully control.
Thank you.
Also, little thing, but the 117 issue has been, you know, kind of in the forefront, and how just dangerous that intersection is. And the SRO daily is out there helping however many hundreds of kids get out of that parking lot.
225 in our student parking lot.
Yeah, and he's helping them every day get out safely. And anyone who's pulled out at pretty much any time of the day knows that, you know, you have to really work carefully there. So that alone is a big thing.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to make sure. I don't know that everyone understands what the function is, and I think because it's such a part of the fabric of the school, that it's important for people to know that. And thank you so much for bringing up your comment. So I think we're all set.
Okay, so you're going to do some research. We're going to engage town council. We'll get together.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Carrie, do you have a business card?
I do, just one second.
All right, next up on our agenda, dispatch town administrator business. Next up is Board of Selectmen business, and the first agenda item is an update on the second sergeant position. Chief Nelson, you want to come down? How are you today?
Good perspective on you.
I think everybody's got the latest organizational chart, and they forwarded to Dawn. I think he sent out to everybody.
Oh, you got some?
As you're aware, had to be a month or two ago that I brought a recommendation over, that was declined. I went back to the second person, the runner-up, the second person who gets through the process. And he declined the promotion, mainly because even in the beginning when we first started the whole project, he did it as an educational process. It was good testing, a lot of reading, a lot of prep work that they had to do. And right off the bat, he said he probably wasn't interested in it because, one, you have to change his shift to midnights. And right now, he's got a pretty good shift for his days and evenings. So after talking to him, he declined coming forward to the sergeant's position. I put it out to the rest of the department, which, from my organizational chart, there's only 4 out of the 8 that really are applicable. I had to lower the number of years down to 2. We were 3 last time, so we had to be an employee with the Bolton Police for at least 3 years to be, as a requirement to apply for the position. And when I did that, it only added 1 person to the mix. So of the 4, only 1 person came forward again, and that was the same person that I had brought forward before. So at this point, I'm kind of at a stalemate because I have no one else other than the last person for that position.
We can't close the
You can't close your door. Sorry, it's loud.
Open meeting with yours to be
If you look at the chart, I've got 1 person that's just starting, that's Frank Baker. Walter came on 5 months ago, Jose 10 months, and I even kind of cornered Will and asked him if it came to it, would he be interested, and he is too busy. He's in the military. That alone keeps him busy, and he's got other things. And again, he's on a good shift, and that can be a drawback to becoming the second sergeant, is you're going to be midnights for a long time until everybody else moves up or somebody retires.
Is Will one of the reserve?
Now, Will Warnken, he's an officer, he's the one with 1 year and 4 months, so he was under my 2-year requirement to even to apply for the position.
So is it Officer Nadeau and Baker who are doing the night shift now?
Well, Frank is going to be in training, so he hasn't, his first day is Monday. So, and Walter, I think, is going to an all-midnight shift.
So what are, among the reserve officers, are any of them interested in full-time?
I would have to say no. They don't have the full-time academy, so if we ever went that route, we'd have to pay them to go to the full-time academy.
I think we discussed this the last time.
Not about the reserves.
I think there was a question that was asked about that.
Oh, that, possibly, but most of them have jobs that they're in, and nobody, Paul Smith is an officer in another town, but I haven't asked any of the reserves if anybody was interested in that.
options?
I guess if you really want to lower my 2-year requirement, I could go to Walter, and Jose would be my only other 2 candidates that they're still on probation for 1 year before we sign them off, say they're good to go. And the only other option is bringing back my recommendation, the recommended officer that we did the first time around.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem at all with that.
And in terms of opening the position up to a broader pool, not existing officers, to the outside?
Then I would have to grow by 1. So if I have 13 employees, I'd have to bring 1 more person on.
Okay.
But that also then nullifies your requirement, which you've already lowered from 3 years to 2.
It would completely lower that because they haven't been employed by the town of Bolton. They really know, the only thing you're gonna get is somebody that may have experience in another town but know nothing about Bolton and wanna come over it.
And so, we did function with 1 sergeant for a long time, so that's another possibility.
It's a possibility. You're now putting a lot of people out on the road with no supervision. So it's one hand washes the other. If you want to go with less supervision on the road, which now kind of makes me not sleep as well at night because I don't have a higher trained person out there making good decisions, it could, once again, open up the whole town for liability. That's what we try to do, have somebody that's a higher trained person that can make the decisions out there, probably the same way I would do.
But so you have Officer Nadeau on the midnight shift, and then who would be on with him?
Will and Jose. So they, between an eve mid-split or straight mids. Depending on where they fall, it could be one or the other. Usually the midnights are the inexperienced officers that are just starting, because once you put a few years in and a few people under you, you get to move up and get the better shifts.
Well, I have to remind everybody that in a previous meeting, we voted and ratified that 2nd sergeant position. So, prior to any discussion tonight, there was no issue on having the 2nd sergeant. And I believe when you, at the time, voted not in favor, this is for Jonathan, you voted not in favor of the 2nd sergeant, it was for cost reasons. But in a subsequent meeting, you voted in the affirmative for that. So would it
No, I
appear to
think
be
that
that...
was the lieutenant position.
No, it was the sergeant. It was the sergeant. So I think from that perspective, that objection is, from your perspective, is now gone because we reaffirmed the 2nd sergeant position.
Yeah, I don't remember it like that. I remember having that objection related to the lieutenant position, not related to the 2nd sergeant. I think Don in his email had, proposed some different options, so I guess I'd like to kind of review those and, talk to Don and figure out a way forward.
So I'm sorry, is that something you want to do now, or is that something in a subsequent meeting, or?
No, I'd like to go back to, you proposed different things in your email. I'd like to look at them again and talk to you and figure out a way forward.
Chairman.
Yes, Ken?
I wanted to speak to the idea of other options. Years ago, when I was a selectman, we had another selectman who had an incident, I'll call it, with a firefighter. And what ended up happening is that the selectman and the firefighter met, and they talked things through. And basically, they came to an agreement, and the firefighter went about his business, and the selectman went about his business. And I'm wondering whether that was either tried or ought to be tried in the case of the top vote getter in the thing who wasn't appointed before, that there be some sort of meeting set up where could be one person with each of the three of you or whatever, but to really talk through what the issues were, to see whether in fact this person should never be the sergeant in town or not. And maybe there's a way forward with that. I don't know if that's an option, but I've seen it work in the past, and so I just want to throw that out as a possible thing to consider.
Yeah, I think that could be a good idea.
It's not going to be an option for me. I'm not changing my mind. I'm not changing my vote. It was a very unpleasant experience. I don't appreciate it, and I'm not changing my mind. I'm not.
I'm a little disappointed because, you know, I know that's your opinion. The gentleman has worked here for 6 years. And you claim, this is your opinion, that you have a problem with that employee.
That's right.
He's still here working as an employee and doing a great job with no black marks on his name here at all. But you've got two, you know, trust me, I'll be as respectful as possible because I think you're dead wrong. And you're closed mind over this whole thing.
Right.
I don't think you are. I will, and I can disagree with you too.
You can.
All right, and unfortunately, I think you're way off on this. You've made the opinion, and it's just not right to ruin a person's career over something that you have a problem that was looked into and was unfounded.
That is not my understanding at all.
That's my understanding. I looked into it.
Well,
unfounded.
It is not my understanding. I'm not changing my vote. So that my decision is final.
Okay, well, I have no one else to bring forward. Unless you want to bring in a reserve that has no training or go outside, I think that's just completely asinine.
Well, I don't appreciate that language, and, you know,
I've heard worse at these meetings.
Not from me.
I'm sorry you feel that way,
I
not
don't
from
think
me.
this is helping.
Well, the board's not helping, so.
Trying to find.
Thank you. Well, if we're done, then I think I've said enough.
Well, let me just say, I am somewhat familiar with the so-called incidents, and I would have to agree with you, Chief. I know you investigated it.
And I know, Stan, you've been 100% behind us, and I hate to say, when the chief of a department will give a recommendation on somebody or gives you a background check, there should be no doubt that I've done my job. And if I'm not doing my job, then I shouldn't be here. That's all right. I don't think I have any support from two people here. I'm sorry to say that too.
and I don't think that's accurate.
Oh, I think it's dead. That's my opinion.
Well, you're entitled.
There you go. You got to.
Well, we'll have to table this to another meeting or something, because I think we have an impasse. Now, I think, Linda, you should go back and look, because I am pretty sure that we reaffirmed the second sergeant position in a subsequent meeting, and I think you should go back and look at that. If that's the case, then your objection to this should no longer be an objection.
Selectman Keith's objection was we were moving too fast at the time, and that was the only...
And looking at potential costs, but that position, I believe, Linda, you should go back, that was reaffirmed, that second slot was there. So for Selectman Keith, that issue should no longer be there, if my understanding of what we voted on is accurate.
I'll be happy to schedule a time with Jonathan, as he suggested, and discuss options that might be workable.
Yes, great.
Craig Lauer, 1020 on Main Street. Just to clarify, I thought that we currently have an open patrolman position. No? I thought there was another one coming up.
We do. Yes, we do. Backfilling SRO who goes away.
Okay, so if we were to take that and turn it into a sergeant's position, would we still need yet another position?
Yes. No. If we went out, we're going to hire somebody from the outside anyways. It could be. But a key point is, I'm going to destroy the whole morale of the department by bringing an outside person.
Sure.
Bring in an outside chief, and you bring an outside lieutenant. It's crazy to even think of that. So it is possible, it is feasible. Would I want to do that? No, I'd have to be ordered to do that. I'd do that.
Yeah, I understand. I understand exactly where you're coming from, Chief. Well, then I guess we're at a slight impasse. Perhaps, Mr. Rowe, you might want to meet with Mr. Keith and discuss options. I'm perfectly fine with bringing back the officer again, but I guess we have to convince Mr. Keith that that's something that he's interested in doing at this point.
Mark A. 95 Main Street. I have a question on the background check that you just mentioned. Have you actually Googled this officer's name in Chelmsford?
We have to be very careful about having a discussion about personnel.
Okay, well, I just think that, you guys have background check on the thing. He just brought up background check. Maybe we should be doing a better background check, I think, on this officer. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yes, and I disagree with what you just said. The officer was hired well before that, and we do social media, we do look on internet stuff.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Good night. Well, I guess, Nick, do we still want to have this discussion, discuss the police background check process?
It's an offshoot from the last meeting that Jonathan made a suggestion.
So it's just the suggestion that that Human Resources, that be Donna Madden and the town administrator review background checks and initial them just as part of management and oversight. So I brought it up last time. Put it on the agenda tonight.
Well, I don't think that's a problem. I mean, it hasn't been a past practice because we rely on the department head in this particular case and coming up, we're talking about the chief of police and reviewing the background checks. But, if we want to add that extra step, I don't think that's a big problem. It's an unnecessary step in my opinion, but it's not a problem.
As I said at the last meeting, I'm supportive of whatever the Board of Selectmen chooses to do. Personally, I don't have a problem with the way the current process works. Our background checks have worked every time. We have disqualified multiple candidates that we intended to hire once we did a background check, and when we find something that's of concern, the person isn't hired. But if this is something the board would like to see, obviously, I'll support it.
Well, I just think, again, talking about lawyers' fees, I just think it's important to, dot our i's and make sure we are accepting candidates with, sterling reputations. They're able to follow the chain of command. They're not litigious. Things like that are very important. And I think it's also important within an organization that, Human Resources and the town administrator are looking at those things. I mean, I don't want to have to say that I have to look at them. That would be micromanaging, but I feel confident if the three of you are looking at them, the chief and Donna and Don Lowe, then I'll feel confident.
And I respect that, and as I said, I'll certainly support it if that's what the board wants to do.
Yeah, I would also support that if that's what's requested. In the past, if the chief has given us any verbal information, and I've questioned I've always got responses to all the questions I've asked.
Is
So
there
I
any-
have full confidence in what we've been given to date.
Is there any other department that acts different? I mean,
I do all the other background checks.
so everyone but the police department?
Yes,
And that's library and council on aging too, or?
yes, I do all the other background checks.
Do they do background, does the police department though do background checks for any
No,
other employees?
no.
Okay.
And that's standard practice in all the towns I've worked in. Police department usually does their own, they can't do driver's license checks or anything that's against the law for them to do that.
Okay. No problem. Someone wants to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the town administrator and human resources reviews background checks, check reports generated by the Bolton Police Department and initials them.
I'll take a second.
I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Next up is a discussion of the formation of a committee to oversee the strategic planning and implementation of Main Street's redesign and improvement. I believe you asked to put that on the agenda.
I did. So I don't know how many months it's been since the committee, I forget the name of the committee right now, that came back.
117 study committee.
It came back with their recommendations, and I wasn't sure of the logistics of not having a committee formed by year end in the event it needed a budget. But I would like to form a committee to be responsible for the strategic planning for Main Street. We've gotten this one grant, and, right, the technical...
The technical assistance, that's right.
And I actually, following our conversation, I actually rewrote my notes, but right now I just can't, out of the technical assistance grant will trigger a need for engineering, right, to start the planning process.
With the tip, I'm assuming the tip was for...
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just from a very high-level generic understanding that we would have this standing committee that would be responsible for overseeing this project, because I understand it's going to be a long time before we get and speaking with Barry Lorian that day with you, to take over that process.
Maybe what we could do, I think the process that Jonathan and I followed to create the subcommittee for the water study. Jonathan and I spent a half hour, 45 minutes in my office to talk about fleshing out some ideas, and then you and I could do that, and then we could use the same charge format that we did for that other subcommittee. And then, once the selectmen finalized the charge, then we could advertise for people who would be interested to serve on it.
In the event the committee needed some money, does the committee have to be formed before year end?
No.
In order to get in on this?
No, we could,
Okay.
we could certainly get that committee created and then go through a discussion process and advisory and work out a budget.
Okay.
So, Don, can you just go over the technical assistance grant? Has that been
Which
awarded?
we've been awarded.
It has been awarded.
Yeah.
I believe it's in the sum of $19,100 or $19,500.
So this is the complete streets
Yes.
and looking at 117 from one end to the other?
It wouldn't necessarily, didn't necessarily have that scope built into it. It's a little looser. It's, to implement complete streets, how we choose to implement it. And the other part of that is the $5,000 match that the town has to provide. And I've asked Erica to check out with MAPC if that needs to be in dollars or if it can be in kind. And we don't have an answer back on that yet, but.
And then there was a recent letter you forwarded from Barry Lorian.
Yes.
To Linda Crabtree's email, and he was hinting at he has some ideas for the high school area.
I'm excited about that. We've had a conversation, and he asked that I organize another meeting at the high school with the same players that we had last time, with the same representation anyway, if different selectmen wanted to go, to talk about options that they're still in the, I guess, formulation stages, but we've had some good talks, and I feel like we've been able to cover some ground, and I do feel like that they're going to come forward with a recommendation that I think we could be amenable to, so I don't want to speak prematurely, but I'm optimistic.
And I know it's probably Stan's turn, but if he decides not to go, I'd be glad to go.
Okay, sure.
Well, I haven't been there in a while, so maybe I'll soon by this time.
No, I think Barry and DOT are trying to be helpful in that area, and I'm hoping that we can see some positives come out of this.
Mary, any comments?
No, I'm excited that the town is considering adopting a complete streets policy.
Yes.
That's good. My suggestion is to form a committee. You might want to pull from the talent that's in the town, from other committees, public ways, planning. Right now, a lot is being worked on for the high school area. So, drawing from those groups that should be invested in that area, that would just be my recommendation.
Sounds good. So the two of you will get together and do your thing. All right, then next up, if we're finished with that agenda item, is a request from the Bolton Access Television folks to release funds of the sum of $28,556.38. Bolton Access TV. All right.
Hi, thank you. So everybody understands, the town receives quarterly funds from Comcast. It's based on the number of subscribers and the agreements in the contract with them about the percentage on everybody's bills that come to us, and those funds essentially pay for the entire operations of Bolton Access TV. The check that just came in was for $28,556.38, and so I would like to request that be transferred to us. Be happy to answer any questions you have about what we're doing or about that. But I did want to mention that a few years back, actually even at the beginning, but most recently a few years back, there was a memorandum of agreement that was written between Bolton Access TV and the town, and it expires this coming July. And so we need to essentially update that. And so what I was proposing is that over the next month or so, sit down with Don, go through the thing, mark it up, and then give it to you guys so you can mark it up further from there, so that by July we'll be able to take care of that. And that would be an opportunity to put in anything that ought to be put in there that isn't already. I mean, I think it's a reasonably standard agreement, and it's been working fine from our perspective, but we're happy to have any input you want on that. So that's something that's on the near horizon.
Right. Okay. And the agreement, Comcast has an agreement with the town?
Comcast has a 10-year contract with the town that was signed in 2013, so that runs until 23. The agreement that I'm talking about is between Bolton Access TV and the town.
Right.
That just basically stipulates the kinds of things we've been doing, the kind of programs that we do, and other things related to the facility and the operations that we conduct.
Is the amount you're receiving quarterly, is that increasing at all?
Slightly, yes. I had forecast, based on the last year, I had forecast 28.5, and it came out slightly more than that, and it's actually gone up every quarter for the last year or more, which in a way is surprising, since it's all based on cable subscribers, but I suppose that's where most people get their internet, and so maybe that's part of what's at work. But yes, it is going up slightly.
Good.
And we're in the process of doing a budget, but it's enough money for us to do what we need to do, and that's a good thing.
So at the special town meeting, I met 2 new employees. Can you tell me about them?
Yes, one of them, well, what we have we'll call it an access coordinator, and we actually had it as a part-time position for one person before, and in replacing that person, we decided in advertising that maybe it would be better both for us and for potential applicants to split the job. And it turns out we found 2 people who were interested in working 10 hours a week. One of them has a similar job in West Boylston in their access TV station, and so she comes with experience and programs that she can bring to us and things of that sort, and was able to hit the ground running. The other person is a bit younger and is just coming off an interesting stint as an intern in Governor Baker's Public Relations Office, where he was following around with a camera, making videos and things of that sort. And he's a Bolton resident and is quite excited about it. And so the idea with the 2 of them is that they cross-train and that they're both in a position by the time they're fully trained to back up Teresa in whatever needs to be done. And so we're confident that the 3 of them working together are really the level of labor that we need, supplemented by volunteers and stuff. But it's the basic in-house employee labor that we need to make it run, and they're working out very well, and they're very excited, and we're excited about what they're doing. So good. That's a good thing, I think. Good.
So I think it was September 27th, Brad Cody mentioned that we were all in a meeting. That was the night when the Board of Health was discussing 2 issues that were of interest to a number of people. One was Cultivate Counseling and 401 Main Street, and the other issue was the Airbnb rental on Kettlehole Road. So 2 items that a lot of people wanted to kind of watch, and I was at a meeting with the advisory committee, so I couldn't watch it later. So just wondering, about that policy and, how we can get more, when people express interest. And sometimes it's short term, sometimes it's 2 days before, how we can get, because the policy of having the Board of Health requesting it doesn't seem to be working, didn't seem to work in that situation.
I guess that's a matter of personal opinion of people, but 2 things about that particular one. It was the morning of that meeting that we were requested to do it, and that's really not enough time to, particularly when there were other meetings going on that were being recorded, that's really not enough time to respond. I would be comfortable with essentially the same process that you have with agendas. The open meeting law requires, I believe, that you have agendas set 48 hours in advance. If I know 48 hours in advance that there's a hot topic that somebody wants to have recorded, then I would be able to deploy the forces to do that. The morning of, I don't think is a reasonable thing to do. But I would also say that your board voted for the policy the way that it is, and so it's really, if you want to change it, your board can change it, and we'll respond however you want to with that. We may be in a position, at least personnel-wise, to be able to cover more. If we want to cover more, I don't know that monetarily that's the case, but if you want to revisit the policy, we're certainly open to revisiting the policy.
What I have already said is that, and Jenny will be following this, is, as Ken said, the agenda must be posted at a minimum of 48 hours in advance. Normally, occasionally it's more than that. But whenever it's posted, I've said when it's posted, if the meeting is to be recorded, that's when VACO should be notified. If there's a request, if the board is requesting that the meeting be recorded, that the day the agenda is being posted, VACO should be notified, so they have a minimum of 48 hours in advance.
No, what the Board of Health has told us is that if they have a meeting that they want to have recorded, they'll know 2 weeks in advance. So that's great, because that allows us to put it on the schedule that we have and be able to program in people and things of that sort. But I certainly understand that something could come up at somewhat the last minute for that. So however, but however you want to do that policy is really your guys' call as far as I'm concerned. And we'll do what we need to do to get the things on the air.
So do I have a motion to approve the 28-5-56-38?
I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Ken. If there are no other items for the Selectmen business to discuss, we will be moving into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to discuss strategy with respect to contract negotiations with non-union personnel. The board will reconvene into open session. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Keith?
Yes.
Saki?
Yes.
Fraser?
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
Thanks for bringing that. Those aren't mine, they're too nice to be mine.
All right, thanks everybody for hanging around. We just exited out of executive session. I'm happy to report that we have managed to come to consensus on Mr. Love's contract. There were a number of items that we discussed, and the final version of the contract was amended to everyone's mutual satisfaction, and we voted 3-0 to renew Don's contract. At this point in time, the process is we need to revote the contract in open session, so I'll make a motion that we will to vote to accept and execute the employment agreement between the town of Bolton and Don Lowe as amended. What will be happening is Tom will be taking the marked up version and producing an additional red line as well as a merged version for us to review again tomorrow at our leisure, and then we'll come in individually, assuming everything's fine, and execute the contract individually. So, do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you.
You guys make a motion to adjourn.
Yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
That's